The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
On behalf of RBCS, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Rex Black, president of RBCS, a worldwide testing and quality assurance firm serving clients ranging from small startups to Fortune 20 global enterprises. Since 1994, we have delivered insight and confidence to hundreds of clients around the world. We have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and expert services to companies that are looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. I'm the author of, as of this month, 13 books on software testing, as well as being the past president of the ISTQB. Attendance at today's webinar earns PMI PDUs. Thank you, Rex Price, for reviewing the materials for PDU status and for making valuable suggestions. Attendees will receive an email telling them how to claim PDUs, including the PDU code. PDUs are available for live webinar attendance only. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, submit them at any time via your webinar interface, but please note that I will only answer them at the end. Hope you enjoy this free webinar from RBCS. We do these free webinars as a service to the software testing community because at RBCS we are a not just for profit company. If you enjoy our free webinars and feel that they demonstrate solid insights into the kind of testing challenges you face, please make RBCS your preferred software testing vendor for any and all expert services, consulting, or training. We're happy to provide a quote for any such help you might need. Contact us at info@rbcs-us.com. Okay, so you see, sort of somewhat provocative question here. Can a mobile device save your life? And it's kind of the title being inspired by, this is a screenshot from one of the recent Mission Impossible films. And, in those films, these various death-defying acts are occurring, often enabled, well, in some cases just by the sheer, outrageousness of some sort of behavior or another, like some driving capability that is, superhuman or something. But many times it's enabled by technology, and more often it's some kind of mobile technology. So, we've got Tom Cruise being saved by his encrypted phone call here. Well, there was an interesting point of departure to look at the intersection between mobile devices and mobile apps and testing and quality. Now, a mobile phone, the concept of a mobile phone is something that goes way back. If you do some research on this, you can see that mobile phones have been with us in some form for quite a long time, prior to the 1960s. I was born in the 60s, and there were mobile phones then. Now, today's mobile phone, the modern mobile phone, if you look at the power of that thing, capability of it, CPU-wise, memory-wise, and so forth, it's incredible. Much more powerful than what would be considered in the 1960s, 70s, a powerful computer. But it's not just a computer. It's a radio. It's a GPS location device. It might incorporate health monitors. So we're starting to do all sorts of things with these devices that go way beyond just, hello, can you hear me? And so there are safety implications, there are crime, fraud implications, privacy implications, security implications, encryption implications, and all of these things have testing and quality implications as well. So this webinar is about exploring some of those implications, and it ties into, it's a companion piece to another webinar that I have called The More Things Change Location, the More They Say the Same, which is about similarities and differences in mobile app testing vis-a-vis more standard types of applications, which did that webinar for the PNSQC conference as kind of a teaser or intro, and we're going to do it again sometime later this year, I think, if you want to catch that. But this is looking at it more from the point, more of a why should I care and what should I care about perspective, rather than the other webinar, which is the what do I need to do? Both of which are important. Of course, you need to know why you should care and what to care about before you can decide what to do about something. So back in the dark ages when I was born, 1960s, we had spacecraft like we do now, and we have mobile phones, but your mobile phone, if your mobile phone ran out of battery in those days, basically what that meant is it would kill your car battery, because if you look at mobile phones like what you see at the bottom there, that would typically be installed in a car. You couldn't carry it around because it drew 250 watts. So unless you're an amazingly buff individual and you're carrying around lead acid batteries, because remember there's no lithium ion then, right? You got the thing in your car, and I hear my daughters all the time. Common refrain on a road trip is, "Oh my God, I'm at 5%." Well, in this case, in the 1960s, that would mean that it killed your car. A jump start for your car because you left your phone on it overnight in it. The other graphic that you see there is the Apollo guidance computer. This is what was actually in the Apollo spacecraft, and take a look at it. 4 kilobytes of RAM, 72 kilobytes of read-only storage, and a 2 megahertz 16-bit single-core CPU. Now I have a LG 4 phone, and it has 3 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of built-in storage, plus 128 gigabytes of SD storage that I installed, and a 1.8 gigahertz 64-bit 6-core CPU. Just hands down, considerably more sophisticated. And of course, if you look inside, I mean, what was running in the Apollo guidance computer was a relatively simple application, probably less than 1 million lines of code total, I would guess, and millions and millions and millions of lines of code across all the different, say, 3 dozen or so apps that are installed on my phone, plus, of course, the Android operating system. So mobile is now everywhere and has overtaken desktop usage. So if you look at this graph here from Morgan Stanley and ComScore, you see the number of millions of global users. And now obviously there's some overlap here. There's some people who are counted once in each line, right? Counted twice, basically once in each line. But so what? I mean, it's still, the point is that you have more people doing computing now on mobile than desktop, though. Interestingly, notice that the number of desktop users continues to go up. And this also gets interesting if you look at the number of hours of time spent, hours-wise, total across all these users. There again, as you might expect, mobile has overtaken and exceeds the hours spent by people on desktop applications, even while the number of hours spent across all the users on desktop applications continues to grow. So when you combine those two growth curves, the number of hours and the number of users, what you see is that it's an exponential increase. And exponential curves are very interesting things. They are very hard for people to wrap their heads around, but they're things that follow exponential curves. The rate of change is exponential as well. The second derivative of an exponential curve is exponential. So it's really hard to get your mind around it. And basically, if you're not testing mobile apps yet, expect that you will be really soon, and probably sooner than you expected. If your company's not doing anything in mobile space yet, that's kind of a warning bell. Like, why are we not mobile? And if you don't know anything about testing mobile apps, then that's a downside from a career perspective. Now, from the the world of entertainment on the first slide to something a little more tragic. Here, you have Tom Cruise pretending to save his life or the life of his team with a mobile phone. This is a picture of people actually trying to change their lives and save their lives with mobile phones. And this is a real thing. I mean, there was an hour-long report that I heard on podcast of folks in these Syrian refugee camps who will trade their food to get money, and a lot of times the money is used to pay for their mobile phone bill. That's how important the mobile phone is to them, because it's their only link to the outside world. They use this to keep in touch with other people. They send messages. They check status on Facebook and so forth. They look for ways to get information about, how to get out of there and get to where they ultimately want to be, wherever that is. So, you can say, well, Facebook, so forth, it's not a safety critical app. Well, tell that to one of these guys. Or think about how Twitter use happened during the Arab Spring and the Iranian uprising against the election that happened there, which was quickly clamped down on, right? So if you're involved in social media, you're building a social media app, tomorrow's Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, or some kind of messaging application, people will do things with it above and beyond what you might have originally in mind. So, when you test it, this is something you want to think about: is might somebody use this, and this in such a situation to exchange information that is, at least from their perspective, personally critical. An expectation that might not be completely realistic, but something you should keep in mind while you're testing. Now, another aspect of this "my phone does everything" world is the, Android Pay and Apple Pay, which use, basically it's a souped up form of RFID, radio frequency identification. So the same kind of thing that allows you to sit down with a fob in your pocket and start your car. That's the basically the same type of technology and same type of radio frequency as this near field communication. And so you're holding your phone near to one of these pay points and using it to make payments. These variations of these things are abound too. I mean, my family and I went to a music festival called Austin City Limits back last month, and you have this little wristband that they give you that's basically this same kind of deal of it's a NFC or RFID device, effectively, that gets you in and out of the park and allows you to make payments and so forth. Now, for Android Pay and Apple Pay, it's not actually transmitting credit card information, but you still want to make sure that things are properly encrypted. And encrypted and properly encrypted are two different things. Which is something that people don't always keep in mind. Now, encryption has to do with, in this case, the transmission being encrypted. And that is important, that while the data is in flight, as it were, that you're thinking about, now how does this, how might somebody get this? Because it's flying through the air, I mean, it's not like a laser beam or something. So, it is potentially sniffable in that fashion. It can be captured, so it has to be encrypted. But even once it gets to the pay side, now there's some interesting, or the back end, excuse me, now there's some interesting issues with respect to all of this private information that's getting into the hands of these people. How is that private information being handled? Is it being managed properly? I'll come back to this a little bit later, but from a testing point of view, if you're testing something like this, then you need to think about security both on the pay side and on the back end, and also back end privacy. As somebody's, say, purchasing a sensitive type of item like, I don't know, AIDS drugs or something like that online, or using this electronic payment, you don't want that information to be something that's gettable. Now, so sometimes people share too much information and post stupid things on purpose. You're not really necessarily thinking about what's going to happen next. Now, this the nicest phrase I can think of for this guy is "jag off." I could go from there. The guy that you see in this picture here is the so-called Affluenza teen. I don't remember his name because it's not important enough to me to remember the name of a person like this. But he got drunk one night, though not just one night, but he apparently got drunk all the time. And one night when he got drunk, he went out driving and killed, I don't remember exactly, but it was like 3 or 4 people, and a family. Wasn't, not just killing adult men is okay, but it wasn't just killing 3 or 4 adult men in a car. It was a family of people that he killed in this car accident. And so his attorney, this is the kind of thing that just makes you have to chant to yourself over and over again that everyone is entitled to the best defense attorney can offer. His attorney argued that this kid didn't really have a properly formed sense of right and wrong because he'd grown up too rich, and his parents had never subjected him to any sort of consequences for his actions. And and I laugh because that's all you can do, confronted with such a ridiculous thing. And the jury bought it, and the judge sentenced this kid to probation. And then one of the conditions of the probation was no drinking, of course. Well, this guy decides to play a game of beer pong with his friends. Now he's on probation, and his friends, who clearly not on a trajectory towards winning any Nobel Prizes. Is the IQ involved in this is somewhat stunning. The guy he posts a picture of this Affluenza teen playing beer pong, and it comes to people's attention, and he's busted. So now. This is just, I think, an example. It's an extreme example, but an example of people don't think, and when that includes when they're using software and using mobile devices and so forth. And so hackers are aware of that, right? So you get people doing stuff like this, posting pictures like this. That's evidence that people don't think. And then you've got various kinds of malware and what's called malvertising, which is advertising that can lead to phishing attacks and so forth, that are out there waiting for people who would be stupid enough to do something like this to come along and bang, they go from prey to a meal for these hackers. So when you are testing mobile apps, you really do need to think about privacy and security, and it also it has to be relatively easy to use those features. And they can't keep turning themselves on and off and so forth. I mean, one of the frustrations that I have is that it seems like my phone updates itself all the time, and that can end up sometimes undoing some of the things that I've turned off, turning them back on again. Or there's stuff that won't work with some certain setting, a more secure setting, so you turn it off for the moment and then forget to turn it back on, right? So just saying, well, we're going to make the maximal privacy and security settings the default on our app, and that'll solve the problem. No, it won't, because if that defeats some feature and then somebody goes in and they turn it off, you know, maybe it's like really difficult to get back in there and turn it back on again and figure that out. Some of the things that, well, mobile apps, you know, people tend to think about usability with them, but not always in terms of the settings that configure them. So while I was putting together this presentation, you know, one of the things I wanted to look at is health information and you know, the intersection of health information with mobile apps and what that meant from a testing quality point of view. So out on the U.S. National Institutes of Health website, I find this thing, mobile healthcare information management utilizing cloud computing and Android operating system. I'm like, oh yeah, nothing could go wrong with that. There's not any obvious risks there. Healthcare information in the cloud. Yep, healthcare information being gathered on mobile devices and transmitted to the cloud. Now let the wheels spin in your head for just a minute on all the things that could go wrong with that. And that, I did some further research. There are over 10,000 mobile apps that handle health-related information. That's a lot of apps. What are the odds that all 10,000 of those organizations that have built those mobile apps have proper training and skill with respect to privacy and security and testing of mobile apps? I put the odds of that pretty low. I'm not saying none of those people know it, but I'm saying that the odds that there are no privacy and security risks associated with any one of those apps, I would put the odds of that at 0%. Now we have a client that they manage hospitals and other health care facilities, and they use an application for that called Optum. And some of this, I don't remember if this is actually Optum software or some related software that communicates with the Optum software. But some of this software does run on tablets and mobile phones. So you got people making critical health-related decisions and passing around health-related information using these mobile devices. Now, you know, this is a big organization, this organization that makes this Optum app, and, you know, Siemens is another big player in this field, and they're obviously huge and very a very serious bunch. But, you know, okay, that's two out of, you know, so that leaves 9,998 others. You know, so this stuff matters. So, you know, if you get involved in this from a testing point of view, you got to think about things like regulatory compliance. And in the United States, that would be both HIPAA and also FDA. Regulatory compliance could be applicable. Now, there's some interesting information about do FDA software testing regs apply to your health-related mobile app, and there's some advice on that out on, I believe it's on the National Institutes of Health website or the FDA website when I was digging around on this, but you got to check to be sure, because if it does apply, then, you know, you better comply with it. Obviously, security and privacy are big issues, especially while the information is being transmitted. So you have to be testing for potential breaches. Inaccuracy issues, of course, could be huge. They could lead to wrong decisions. There was a tragic case about a decade ago where a surgeon transplanted the wrong lung into this poor teenage girl whose lungs were failing, and by wrong lung, I mean the blood type of the donor was wrong, and you know, this girl died. Now, most of the blame for that was pinned on the surgeon, but there were information technology aspects of this too, that it should never have gotten to the point where this girl's life depended on the surgeon being diligent enough to do what he was supposed to do, which was double, triple check the blood type of the donor and the blood type of the recipient. But it did get to that point, and he didn't check it, and So, making sure the data is accurate. I mean, we saw this recent thing with this Theranos application, and there's accuracy issues there. And, the more magical the promise of your app, the more careful and the more skeptical your mindset needs to be as a tester. You don't necessarily have to go around saying these kinds of things and say, that'll never work, but you want to be careful. And you need to think about, data collection issues. Data sizes are limited on mobile devices, and they do vary quite a bit. So, what kind of data collection can actually be done? Sensor capabilities, that's something that has to be kept in mind. Okay, well, about a year ago, we had the very tragic holiday party shooting incident in San Bernardino. And some of you might remember that the FBI, as part of recovering evidence from that really incredible, almost cinematic crime scene, got a cell phone, an Apple cell phone. Now, the phone, the terrorists who used the phone had thought to encrypt it, so it wasn't just a matter of, we get on and boom, there it is. It was basically set up to wipe. The phone was set up to wipe if you entered the wrong passcode 3 times, I believe. And, encryption has come a long way since the 1940s. This, you see here, the German Nazi Enigma machine, which was famously broken by the folks in Bletchley in the UK, Turing, among others, being involved in that. Modern encryption is much more sophisticated than that, and just a few clever people looking at it aren't supposed to be able to break it. And Apple said, hey, we can't do this for you, because if we come up with a way of doing this, then it's out. It'll get out in the real world, and then, our customers are exposed. So deadlock there, and then a company later claimed to have done this for the FBI, actually have broken it and given it to the FBI. The FBI claimed that they had it. Now, I don't know. I have a certain amount of skepticism about that, though, I can understand that there's, what we see and hear about with respect to this story is, not even the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. And there's obviously a lot of incentives for nobody to be completely straight about what actually went on. But really, this exposes something interesting and important from a testing and quality point of view. The whole modern internet is really based on the idea of having secure encryption. Now, when I say modern internet, I mean an internet that allows you to actually do things, not just read things. I mean, if all we ever used the internet for was putting information out there for God and everyone to see, then of course encryption wouldn't really matter. But as soon as you get to the point where you want to be able to send somebody an email that nobody else can read, you want to be able to make a purchase and be confident that nobody's going to capture that mid-flight, so forth, you're now in the land of needing strong, secure encryption. So hence the whole public key infrastructure comes into play. And this is all really, really complicated stuff. I took a training course about a decade ago, got my Security Plus certification after taking this. It was about 8-week long virtual class. You read a textbook that was about 800 pages long as part of getting ready for this. This is really complicated stuff. And a smart career path. So if you are a tester and you're thinking, where could I go career-wise? What would be an interesting thing to specialize in? There's a lot of interesting stuff out there with respect to security. So I recommend taking a look at that. Now, in the fables, I believe this is the Grimm brothers fairy tales, Hansel and Gretel, when they went into the forest, left behind breadcrumbs so that they could find their way out. Now, of course, the thing that's funny about when we use this phrase, digital breadcrumbs, to refer to tracking information, of course, people tend to forget that in the story, in the Hansel and Gretel story, the breadcrumbs turned out to be utterly useless because the birds came along and ate them. So, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it and whose eyes you look at it through, that's not the way the digital breadcrumbs work. So, Osama bin Laden found that out, though he may not have understood that this was what led to his downfall, but found that out the hard way on the business end of some very tough hombres and their firearms one early morning. And of course, again, this is another one of these places where what you can know and what actually happened and all the details of what actually happened are, somewhat obscure, right? But the popular telling of this that appears to have gained some amount of credence, and appears to come from more or less credible sources, is this idea that one of the couriers that was bringing information to and from bin Laden, who was smart. Bin Laden, evil man that he was smart. He did not go on the internet. He did not have mobile devices in his house. And getting information to him and from him was done via a courier who was not supposed to have his cell phone on, but apparently at the wrong point in time he did have his cell phone on, and that is, as the story goes, something that led to his bin Laden's discovery. Well, first the courier's uncovering, and then bin Laden's uncovering, and then bin Laden's blessed demise. But stepping aside from the fact that we might have feelings about the goodness of what ended up happening there, bin Laden and his gang were very, very careful to practice really good IT operational security, and yet, if somebody's looking for you all the time, and there's just one screw up, you see my point? So we're now seeing situations where law enforcement usage is, so what the law enforcement usage that went on here with the bin Laden thing is basically forensics, right? Investigation and connecting dots after the fact. This is now getting to the point where it's real time, where the active scenarios, mobile apps and mobile devices are being used in active law enforcement scenarios. I can't really share a whole lot more details because the one person that talked to me about this in detail said you can't tell anybody about this, but it's it's real life and death stuff. Guns going off kind of situations. So obviously, if you're involved in testing an app like that, it is really, really important that it be very accurate. If it says, law enforcement person X is here, law enforcement person Y is here, and bad guy is here, all of those things need to be true, and true to a very precise degree, within inches, not within feet. You don't want to shoot in the general direction of the bad guy. And you want to make sure that the ability to distinguish the good guy from the bad guy is accurate, right? Now, we've had this in battlefield situations. It's called IFF, identification friend or foe, and that's been around for a long time. But we're talking about something here done on mobile devices and done in exceptionally dynamic, close quarter situations where it's different than being outside in a battlefield. So lots and lots of testing, and lots of testing under very dynamic circumstances. Now, as you can tell, I like to watch movies. It started with Mission Impossible, and now here we are, Tom Cruise again. This is Minority Report. Now, you might remember in Minority Report, he's on the lam because he gets framed for a murder, and what in this scene, he's going through a mall, and you hear, you can't really see it but this is the part where he's basically up right in front of him, where the direction he's looking, there's a big Guinness ad that just came up, and it says, you could use a Guinness, John Anderton. So it's like you figured out, okay, he's John Anderton based on an iris scan, and he's running around, he looks a little harried, so hey, you could use a Guinness. But this was iris scan, not mobile devices. Now, at this point, everybody's carrying a tracking device. You are, if you've got your phone and it's turned on. In some cases, it doesn't even have to be turned on. I mean, if the batteries are in it. And you might think, well, really? I mean, people doing that, like targeted advertising based on mobile phone? Yep, Google is working on it as we speak. So you might be like, okay, it's funny, John Anderton, want a Guinness. Well, maybe not. Think about the targeted ads that come up on your browser when you're browsing. That's what we're talking about. You're walking down the street, and all of a sudden there, for not just you, but everybody to see, is an ad targeted at you. Maybe now you're worried, because it kind of depends on what you search on the internet for and what you buy on the internet. And again, this is tied into what you do online in the privacy of your bedroom or computer room and so forth, in the privacy of your house. That information is going to get tied in to these ads, which will be displayed in public. So, if you're testing something like this, you need to think about, well, what happens if I go off and create an account? You probably don't want to do this on your own account, and do shopping for some, embarrassing products. I don't think I need to get into details on that. Or health status issues. Oh, I noticed that you're buying antiretroviral drugs on the internet. Oh, hey, we have this new, club for people with AIDS or something, completely inappropriate like that. I mean, because weird stuff happens, right? And there's also safety issues, like it should be possible for police officers, security agents, FBI agents, CIA, other kinds of people who have very legitimate reasons to not be outed as themselves under their own name, to not be announced that, hey, John Anderton, you need a Guinness in the middle of stalking down, the next Bin Laden or al-Baghdadi or whoever, they're going after. Those are things that need to be tested. So lots of application of equivalence partitioning here, making sure you don't miss any important equivalence partitions, identifications of personas, careful testing according to personas are all going to be keys to trying to minimize the risk of this technology as it bursts into the public sphere. Now you might be thinking, yeah, well, I mean, surely we can trust them. I mean, it's Google. I mean, their whole, corporate slogan is "Don't be evil." Well, no, you surely cannot trust them. You can trust them to do what they are supposed to do, and you can also trust that every now and then somebody's going to act like a human being, and that has different kinds of variations. Sometimes one of the variations of being a human being is to be a jerk. So a good example of this is the Uber's so-called rides of glory analysis. So Uber, as you might know, is a mobile ride-sharing application, and what happened was that they started looking at these accounts where people called up an Uber at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, So like, okay, that's good on you. You know, you've been drinking and you chose not to drive. You know, so now you're calling an Uber and the Uber comes and picks you up. And then that same account calls for a pickup at a place other than their home at, say, 4 or 5 in the morning. And so basically they were doing this sort of comparison of, you know, who's these accounts and who's got the, you know, the most active, you know, one night stand record and so forth. And it's just, you know, very silly, sophomoric kind of stuff, which came to light. People heard about it, and Uber was, you know, publicly shamed for it, and, you know, justly so. But unfortunately, what didn't come to light was the analysis itself, right? Because that kind of stuff can have some pretty serious consequences. You think about when Madison Ashley got hacked, and people got information for that. And if you forget who they are, that's the married people cheating site. You know, and there were a number of people who killed themselves because that data got outed. They got outed, and they were revealed to be, you know, married people who shouldn't have been doing that, and some of them killed themselves. So, you know, this is now these are examples of either childish behavior or carelessness in the case of Ashley Madison, resulting in you know, bad behaviors. But there are also perfectly good reasons why companies are going to not be trustworthy here, because a company is an entity that it's you know, its reason for being is to maximize profits within legal constraints that are imposed by governments. So if they're absent any legal constraints, if they can make money selling information or using information about you, then they're going to do it. They have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to take advantage of legitimate money-making opportunities. You know, if they're passing up millions of dollars in potential revenue just because they're like, well, I'm not really entirely comfortable with that, then, you know, they actually cannot do that. So a good tagline to remember here, I didn't make this up, I heard this, is if you're not paying for it, you're the product, not the customer. So you are not Facebook's customer. You are not Twitter's customer. You are not LinkedIn's customer. You are not YouTube's customer. You are their product. And they are selling you. They are trying to make money off of you. So now as a tester testing such an app, you know, you obviously have the interest of your employer that you have to keep in mind, but you also have to balance that against certain public interests and at least try to you know, think about ethical issues, think about how you would feel if you were the customer. You know, I'm not calling for becoming the scold of your company by any means, but, you know, I think if the right person had said, when somebody in Uber proposed that Rides of Glory analysis, had said something like, if we do this and if people find out and this ends up on the front page of the New York Times, how are we going to look? If the right person had said that to the right person at the right time, that probably wouldn't have happened. Now, your phone talks too much. It talks way too much. It talks through all sorts of different interfaces, some open, some proprietary. And making the thing talk a lot is kind of a feature, but it's also kind of a bug. It's a feature in the sense that it of course, enables additional functionality, but it's a bug in that almost inevitably is going to open up additional security holes. And by default, the device is going to talk too much, unless you actually go out of your way to tell it, hey, shut up on that channel, shut up on that channel. And then that, of course, interferes with functionality, so people tend to leave that stuff on because, you know, that most people don't know much about security. One of the good things about going through and just taking even a fairly basic course on security and security testing is it tends to flip a little switch in your head that never turns off again, and you're like constantly going, things that won't come to mind. Now, but you have to remember that remember what it was like before that switch got flipped in your head and the kind of blithe, trusting assumptions you made about technology and how it was going to work. So if you're testing an app, look for these issues like, hey, it's got, too much information being broadcast out, and, report that as a concern. Now, people might come back and say, well, it has to do that because that enables XYZ feature, and this is our selling point. But, it's something that people need to think about. Now, what's funny is that all of the things that I've been going off about here, and you might be thinking, oh, wow, I'm surprised that Rex even has a cell phone. But I do, and I use them, and I try to be security aware about it, and I try not to do things on it that I wouldn't want to see published on the front page of a newspaper. The original freak out about cell phones, though, was cancer. That the phone was like this thing that was pointing a gun at your head. Here, I've got the metaphorical gun pointing out of the phone there in the picture. That the phone itself, the physical device and the way it worked, was going to kill you, or could kill you. When Ted Kennedy died of a brain tumor, there was a lot of muttering about how he always had a cell phone pressed up against his head, and the radio in the cell phone must have given him the glioma that killed him. Well, the National Institutes of Health, which has no reason to cover this stuff up, says no consistent evidence that non-ionizing radiation increases cancer risk. So, nope. It's not going to kill you by giving you glioma. It might kill you because somebody robs you at gunpoint for your phone, but that's actually fairly rare, and it is on a downward trend because of kill switch technologies in phones that basically make the phone worthless if it's stolen. So, there's really not a lot of value or profit for somebody to go up to you and point a gun at you and say, give me your phone, because, you just give them the phone, and then you 15 minutes later you kill it, and then it's a brick. But can the phone lead you to do something dangerous? Yeah, absolutely. And as usual, it's the boring stuff. So distracted driving. Much of distracted driving is attributed to distraction by mobile devices, and there are 10,000 people and killed and 1 million people injured every year in the U.S. from distracted driving. Distracted walking. Yep, that's a real honest-to-God thing, and you've seen it if you've been in any major city. And so there are thousands of people that die every year, and tens of thousands of injuries per year in the U.S. due to distracted walking. Basically, someone steps out into a street while they're texting or they're screwing off with their phone, and they get hit by a car or some variation of that. Usually not as extreme as walking off the edge of a building, 150 feet in the air, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's happened. Or falling off the edge of a cliff while trying to do some goofy selfie, not paying attention to where the edge of the cliff was. That's probably happened. So if you're testing, one of the things you might want to look at is can your app try to figure out, is somebody distracted, and is there a safe way of testing that distraction feature? Now, I mentioned the presentation, the other presentation on the specifics of testing mobile apps, especially what's different in mobile devices, so as well as what's the same. Now, the thing to keep in mind is there are a lot of things that are the same when you're testing. So I've mentioned a number of techniques. The techniques, all the major techniques still apply. Certainly automation is a big deal because of frequency of updates. There are issues with respect to test data management and test environment management that are common. Again, think of the healthcare stuff. Mobile apps are buggy. Sometimes people say, well, it's a simple piece of software. It doesn't mean it won't fail. It doesn't. You think about defect density. Smaller number of lines of code is one thing, but if there's a lot of bugs in it, then there's per line, then that's a concern. You have to think about more than just functionality. So usability, performance, reliability are just as critical for mobile apps as for regular apps. If you're doing something that's safety critical or mission critical, again, don't just go, well, it's a mobile app, right? So it doesn't, it's not that important. It is, if you're doing safety critical or mission critical things, then the app, regardless of the platform that it's running on, needs to be tested to that same degree of rigor and with respect to any applicable standards. And as with any other kind of testing in IT fields in general, let's expect that skills growth is going to be a constant issue, that the rate of change continues with IT to just be huge. And as I said, it's exponential growth curves, and exponential growth curves, the second derivative is also exponential. And if you've forgotten your calculus, that basically means the rate of change of the rate of change is changing. Now, in terms of what's different, well, there are a number of things that are different. So mobile apps tend to interact with the real world in a number of interesting ways through sensors, and not just the, what seemed 30 years ago to be this revolutionary, mouse GUI keyboard kind of triumvirate. And, that was a big deal because, like, well, we transcended the character-based screen and the keyboard itself. And now it's like, whoa, okay, that's like really old school. So sensors interact with the apps, and those influence behavior. Connectivity is something that's constantly changing, at least while the device is moving around, because it's changing its relationship to the transmitters that it's communicating with. And it's using radios to do this, and radios are weird. Now, by weird, what I mean is radios are not digital. Now, I mean, really, I guess you should think that digital is weird, because digital is a way of modeling the real world that is quite different than the real world actually is. And of course, analog is the world is actually analog, and radios are analog. But the thing is that as software people, we've gotten used to how digital stuff is and how digital stuff acts. Well, analog ain't digital, and radios are weird. Radios exhibit behaviors that are not going to be intuitive to somebody who's only ever tested apps running on PCs or apps running on client server apps, with wired connections and that kind of thing. Apps are small, and apps leverage other apps. So there's incredible amounts of interoperability relative to the typical application that runs on a PC or in a client server type of environment, which creates lots of interesting testing implications. Phones are often not, mobile devices, and phones being among them, are often not plugged into the wall. They can be, but that what makes them mobile is the ability to carry them around. And so while you are carrying these things around, they are using power, and there's all sorts of stuff that has to go on from a power management point of view, and the battery is a chemical thing, so it's weird and analog too. And the CPU capabilities are being scaled up and down based on the battery and power management, which is further affected by the ambient temperature that the device finds itself operating in. And so it's very different in a lot of ways than the environment in which a PC app runs. Technological change has stabilized for PCs. It is definitely not for mobile devices, so that's much faster. Mobile devices continue to be relatively small from a capability point of view, CPU, memory, and storage. And if you do some research on this, you'll see that there are limits. I mean, obviously you could put bigger CPUs into mobile devices, but the problem is bigger CPUs consume more power. And then you not only have power consumption, you've got a heat dissipation issue, and you can't put a fan on a mobile phone. I mean, you could, but imagine that. Constant updates. which even if you don't change your software, some software you interoperate with might change, and that has all sorts of testing implications. And then the way in which the app interacts with the real world and the way the apps interact with the users is often very different than what you'd have with a PC app. So again, more on this when I do the More Things Change Location webinar later. You want to get into some more detail. So mobile devices have certainly come a long way since those enormous lunch pail size things that I showed you on one of the earlier slides. And the change really has been phenomenal in the last 10 years, since the introduction of the first iPhone really is. It was the seeds were being laid prior to that. And, you think about, well, there was a Palm Pilot, and other kinds of PDAs. So it wasn't like that the iPhone leapt out of Steve Jobs' head like he were Zeus and, the iPhone was Athena or anything like that. It wasn't quite that way. But certainly that kind of put it all into one package and was the beginning of some very interesting changes. The apps certainly can make life a lot more convenient. They can provide various kinds of entertainment. I'm a real podcast fan, and I learn a lot through listening to podcasts. Supporting health and safety, law enforcement applications, health management applications. These are all good things, but they all come with risks. And hopefully I've helped to make you aware of some of those risks and given you some ideas, some initial ideas on kind of things to think about with respect to testing. As I said, more information is coming in that subsequent webinar, and of course we also have our mobile testing course, and I see some folks who've actually attended our mobile testing course here today, so welcome, guys. So, be ready to test this stuff because, if not now, soon you probably will be, and you need to position yourself to be ready for it. Okie dokie, so put the advertisement up. That concludes the presentation, so at this point I will answer questions from the audience. Please submit any questions you have using the Q&A feature. First, before we do that, a quick word about our services. As I mentioned earlier, we have a team of international consultants that deliver customized training, consulting, and expert services to companies looking to improve their test and quality assurance practices. If you feel that you have received valuable information from our free webinars, please help us continue to provide them by making RBCS your preferred software testing vendor for any and all expert services, consulting, or training. We are happy to provide a quote for any such help you may need. Contact us, info@rbcs-us.com. Okay, so I see we have questions. Okay, let's see. Somebody mentioned early in the presentation the audio was popping in and out. But nobody else commented on that, and that usually means that the person who had that problem was probably having a connectivity problem. I was watching the network connectivity at my end, which, by the way, it's wired, and it's a PC that I'm running off of, so it's not a mobile device. So I didn't see anything there. So hopefully that wasn't too much of an inconvenience for you, Jeff. Amit says, you mentioned privacy issues on mobile apps. Many apps now collect sensitive data without actually caring about security. For instance, an app I use tracks my cycling paths. Apparently, by default, it's public and searchable on Google. Wow. Yeah, boy, that's that's really interesting. That's a significant risk. I mean, not to bring up something that's kind of creepy, but people. You hear about people, especially women, getting kidnapped and other horrible things happening, like when they're out jogging. So yeah, having that kind of information about people's jogging patterns and paths, or bicycling patterns and paths and stuff being publicly accessible, that's just not, that's not cool. Now, I can see why from their point of view, they're like, oh yeah, we want to have that capability, but, that might look like a feature, but I mean, if you're a person who has a restraining order out against a violent, intimate partner of some kind or another, and that's just the last kind of information that needs to be searchable on the web. So thank you for mentioning that. Amit follows up with a thought, when I thought about it, why would the app care about securing the information? Security is definitely not a priority, for them anyway, and rightly so. Can we change the situation? Yeah, see, I mean, this gets to the point that I made earlier about no, surely we cannot trust them, right? There is no universe in which it is in everybody's best interests for anybody to be able to see where they rode their bicycle or jogged or walked around or whatever over the last few months. I mean, that's just not, it is not in the individual's best interest. Now, it is in their best interest perhaps to make that information available and searchable for people who are curious or people who want to do some kind of analysis of it. And of course, it takes work to secure it. You'd actually have to expend energy to secure it and to test that it works, and why bother, because nobody's making you. And this is where it comes down to, is that I'm a pretty big fan of free markets and free enterprise. And I'm always, I'm always a little skeptical when I hear people yell market failure, because that's, people say that as a preface to launching into some sort of, we need to regulate X, Y, or Z. But I mean, this is clearly an ongoing issue. I mean, I personally would like to see the United States adopt a rule more like what the Europeans have, which is basically says that data about you belongs to you, regardless of who collected it. It doesn't belong to the person who collected it. It belongs to you, and you have rights associated with that. Here, for some sort of very bizarre interpretation of the First Amendment, somewhere or another, somebody said that the person who collected it owns it. I don't see how that's, I'm not a legal scholar, but I mean, I can read English, and I don't know anywhere in the First Amendment, the way I've read it, that says, and oh, by the way, this means that anybody who wants to can gather information about you and post it. Now, I get that there are issues, and Google has issues with that European rule and so forth. But clearly, Amit's put his finger on a scenario here that's not, it's not cool. I mean, it's not, shouldn't be just posting information about you. Now, of course, in the meantime, what can you do? Well, don't use that kind of stuff, right? Stefano says, good webinar, Rex. How goes it? Says, oh no, how it goes. Knowledge is power, and the best security measure for your PC is to keep it offline. Nowadays, level of knowledge is almost proportional to the amount of data you can access. Mobile devices are always online, or always easily accessible, and full of interesting data. Yep. Yeah, so you're just walking around with a little hack magnet in your pocket, basically. Lena, I think with respect to my comment about law enforcement uses, says, we have one application that tracks first responders. We do this to help find the fastest route and to measure response time. Yep. Yeah, so there's an example of, it's not just for forensic uses. It's real time, keeping first responders safe and making them more effective and efficient. And this is only going to increase. Let's see. Meet says, as for your recommendation to focus on security, any resources you'd recommend to start with? Well, certainly there are good, fairly good books out there on security. I would recommend going broad rather than deep. So as a starting point, so you could go and go, wow, I'm going to learn how to do penetration testing. I'm going to be, a white hat hacker. don't know why that was so hard to say. It was white hat hacker. Um, and, you could learn that, and that's certainly a valuable skill. And if that's something that, you're really interested in and it would just kind of like get your juices flowing, do that kind of work, then, by all means do it. But there's a whole lot more to know than that about security. And personally, when I did the Security Plus course and got that certificate, that's, I wanted to go broad rather than deep. There's now some ISTQB certifications, and we're going to be supporting those with some boot camps in 2017 on security. So those will be additional resources to look at. So I mean, I think there's a lot out there. At the very least, as a tester, I think this is something that you should have a good general awareness of. It's like usability. Even if you're not responsible for security testing, even if you're not responsible for usability testing, it still really is something that you ought to know about. Not necessarily know about like, I am an expert and can do this myself, but know about in like you can have an intelligent conversation with somebody else about the topic and at least know whether they seem to know enough to do it. I see Amit forwarded on to me a website, a web page that you don't have to actually go to the web page to get a pretty darn good idea of what it's about. It's on Wikipedia and it's called List of Selfie-Related Injuries and Deaths. So thank you for that, Amit. I shouldn't laugh, but I mean, it's still, I see some of this stuff going on, the way people behave with these phones, and it's like, come on. Jeff says, got it fixed in reference to his audio problem, so glad to hear that. So Stefano's got another comment here regarding what I had on page 15. He says, Rex, are mobile apps really tested? Maybe the few that are developed by real software companies. Most are crap, but people still get amazed by a huge amount of available apps in the store, or happy because the apps get updated all the time. Still huge amounts of people trust, install, and use those apps. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have, as we IT professionals, software professionals, have successfully trained most people in the world now not to open attachments sent by people you don't know on your PC when you're reading your email. Don't open unexpected attachments. Nonetheless, people still do it, but at least it's better than it used to be. But the same people who would never, ever, ever open an unexpected attachment will very happily go out to the App Store and download an app by somebody that they don't know from Adam. And, oh, well, but it's free, and install it on their PC, the same PC that they carry with them at all times. And then, when the thing pops up a message about this app wants to access blah, blah, blah resources, which might possibly include being able to get on the internet and so forth, and people just click allow. Like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. What could go wrong with that? Plenty. Meat says, another thing to consider in mobile testing is that mobile users are much less tolerant to bugs and will uninstall an app very quickly if they see a problem or suspect one. That is indeed true. Yep, users, because the price is usually free, they're generally happy just to throw the crappy app overboard and go out and look for an alternative. Which is, I think, is generally a good thing. That barriers to exit in software are not cool. Well, I'll make that more or less blanket statement. I mean, I think the fact, apologies to any of you all who are working at Microsoft, whoever did work for Microsoft, but I feel like Microsoft has gotten away with shifting an enormous amount of the costs of external failure that in a just world they would have borne. The problems with the Windows operating system and just legion problems with Office of one kind or another that lead to millions of hours of lost productivity every year, for which Microsoft pays not a dime, and worse yet, loses no business because of barriers to exit. That is very difficult to get around and get along in this world without Windows applications, without Office. Now that is changing, but has been the case for many years. There's still plenty of organizations that are guaranteed to need tens of thousands of licenses to run Office on Windows. And that from a quality point of view, that has not been a good thing for software or software users. So having zero barriers to exit, that it's just very easy for someone just to toss an app and go, that's garbage, I'm off to something else, is, I think, in general, a good thing. Of course, coupled with the fact that the apps are free and that there's, there's basically no consequence in many circumstances to an app maker throwing spaghetti against the wall to see if it sticks. That's not necessarily a good thing for quality, software quality either. So, it's it could be a case of trading one set of problems for another, I guess. So, hard to say where that ends up going, for sure. A wild and woolly decade or so coming with respect to mobile apps and Internet of Things, which is sort of just the natural conclusion of mobile apps, right? Going from everybody has an IP address in their pocket to everybody has an IP address in their pocket, and everything that everybody has other than their underpants has an IP address too. That's kind of where we're going, but it's more of the same, and it does also have some fairly interesting implications. Yeah, we'll certainly keep software professionals busy for more years than I've got left to be working, I would guess. All right. Well, thanks for the great questions, guys. Good, it was good discussion with you. Hope that you found this interesting. To close the session, do remember that we do these free webinar sessions once a month. There will be one in December. We're having to move it, so you'll get a notice of that, and it's going to be right after the Christmas holiday, which I know probably won't be really convenient for everybody, but hopefully a lot of you can attend it or just catch the recorded one. Go to rbcs-us.com to sign up for our webinars and sign up for our regular free newsletter. This will get you valuable discounts on consulting and training services, along with a regular newsletter that includes a featured article on software testing and quality and news about what we're up to. We'll probably be talking about my books here soon, the 2 books that I've just finished, and more details on that. We'll probably include some featured articles out of those. And as far as the valuable discounts, yeah, absolutely. Like, for example, we're working on a mailing right now that is going to feature a 20% discount on assessments. So that's big. That's big savings. And it's especially for folks like you who are loyal webinar attendees. We're only going to send it to, that offer goes out just to people who have attended our webinars in the last year. We are on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube at the various coordinates that you see here on this slide. Current and previous recorded webinars are posted regularly, so do watch for those on social media. The blog is back, so rbcs-us.com/blog. So we offer all these free resources as a service to the software testing community, because at RBCS we are a not just for profit company, but please don't forget we also need to keep the lights on. So please do make RBCS your preferred software testing vendor for any and all expert services, consulting, or training. This concludes the webinar. Thanks for joining us, and see you next session.